I killed my husband with a stone in front of our family compound, and the worst part. It wasn't the first time I'd raised my hand against him. But before you judge me, before you call me a monster and scroll past this story, I need you to understand something. Every villain has an origin story. Every broken person was once whole. And sometimes, the cycle of violence is an inheritance we never asked for but couldn't escape. Wait. Don't click away yet. Because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about love, trauma, and the thin line between victim and perpetrator. Subscribe to this channel, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why some people are destined to destroy everything they touch. And you pray you never become one of them. My name is Cynthia, and I am a Yoruba woman from Ibadan, specifically from the affluent Oluyo estate where mansions hide the darkest secrets behind their imposing gates. I was born an only child to Chief Owolobi Kemi and his wife, a woman whose name I struggle to speak even now because it carries the weight of 15 years of suffering compressed into a single syllable. People who saw us from the outside thought we had everything. My father's sprawling compound, the fleet of cars parked in our driveway, the housekeepers who moved through our home like ghosts, never making eye contact, never speaking unless spoken to. We looked like success. We looked like happiness. We were neither. For 15 years, my parents' marriage was a battlefield disguised as a home. I grew up measuring time not in birthdays or holidays, but in the intervals between fights. 3 days of peace. 5 days of cold silence. 2 hours before the next explosion. I learned to read the room before I learned to read books, watching my father's jaw tighten, observing my mother's hands tremble as she set down his evening meal, calculating how quickly I could disappear to my room before the storm broke. My mother never fought back with words. She took it all, the accusations, the insults, the systematic dismantling of her spirit, with the silence that I mistook for weakness. I was too young to understand that silence was her only weapon, her last shred of dignity in a war she could never win. And then came the day that changed everything. I was 10 years old. The details are burned into my memory with the kind of clarity that trauma provides, cruel and unforgiving. My father came home angry about something. Perhaps it was business, perhaps it was nothing at all. With him, the trigger was always irrelevant, the explosion was inevitable. My mother said something. I don't even remember what. It could have been about dinner. It could have been about the weather. But my father's hand moved faster than thought, connecting with her face with a sound that echoed through our massive living room like a gunshot. She fell. Not gracefully, not cinematically. She fell the way people actually fall when violence meets flesh, awkwardly, desperately, her hands reaching for something to break the descent and finding only air. Her head struck the corner of our marble coffee table, and the sound it made was different from the slap. Duller. More final. There was blood. There was screaming. There was my father, suddenly sober with the realization of what he'd done, calling her name over and over. But my mother didn't answer. She would never answer anything again. That night, I lost the only person who had ever loved me unconditionally. And I gained a question that would haunt me for the rest of my life: how do you mourn someone while living with their murderer? After my mother's death, my father transformed from a functional alcoholic into something darker, something more dangerous. The drinking intensified. The man who had once maintained the facade of respectability, who had gone to work and managed his businesses even through the haze of alcohol, abandoned all pretense. Our home became a mausoleum where a monster roamed freely. The staff quit one by one, unable to tolerate the environment. Eventually, it was just us, a grieving, angry child and a man drowning in guilt, rage, and cheap gin. I became his target, his outlet, his punching bag for emotions he couldn't name or control. He called me, abhorring me, my woman, which should have been an endearment but sounded like an accusation in his drunken voice. As if I was somehow supposed to replace what he'd destroyed. As if a child could fill the void left by a wife he'd murdered. The night everything ended came without warning, though perhaps I should have seen it coming. It was 11:35 p.m., and I was lying in my bed, burning with fever. My body ached, my head throbbed, and I had drifted into that uncomfortable space between sleep and wakefulness where reality blurs at the edges. Abhorring me. Abhorring me. Abhorring me. 3 times he called, each repetition louder, more aggressive. But I couldn't move. The fever had locked my body down, and even if I'd been healthy, the fear would have paralyzed me. I heard his footsteps, heavy, uneven, the gait of a man who'd spent hours with a bottle. My bedroom door crashed open, and then he was on me, his fist raining down, his breath thick with alcohol and rage. He beat me with the systematic thoroughness of someone who'd done this before, someone who knew exactly how much damage a human body could take. I felt ribs crack. I tasted blood. I felt consciousness beginning to slip away, and with it, any hope of survival. My hand, moving more on instinct than intention, found the fork on my bedside table, left over from dinner I'd been too sick to finish. It was a small thing, insignificant, the kind of object you'd never look at twice. It became a weapon. I stabbed upward, aiming for nothing in particular, just desperate to make the pain stop. The fork found his neck, sinking deep into the soft flesh there, and suddenly everything stopped. My father's eyes went wide, his hands flew to his throat, and he stumbled backward. He fell. Just like my mother had fallen. And just like her, he didn't get back up. I killed my father in self-defense, but in our community, the narrative was already written. A girl child taking the life of her father was abomination, a sin so profound that no explanation, no context, no truth could erase it. I would be ostracized, possibly killed in the name of traditional justice. So I ran. At 11 years old, I disappeared into the night, leaving behind the only home I'd ever known, my father's corpse cooling on my bedroom floor, and any chance at a normal childhood. For a year, I survived on the margins of Lagos, begging, stealing, doing whatever was necessary to stay alive. I learned to make myself invisible, to read people's intentions, to trust no one. The streets were brutal, but at least they were honest in their brutality. At least I knew where the danger was coming from. Eventually, through a combination of luck, persistence, and the kind of street intelligence that only adversity can teach, I found work. I lied about my age, created a new identity, and slowly rebuilt something resembling a life. I was no longer Cynthia, daughter of Chief Owolabi Kemi. I was just another young woman trying to survive in a city that devoured the weak. And then I met him. His name was Kemi. When he first introduced himself, I felt the blood drain from my face. Kemi. The same name my father had carried. The same name that appeared in my nightmares, sled by alcohol and followed by violence. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to put distance between myself and this man who carried my trauma in his very name. But he was nothing like my father. Kemi was gentle, patient, persistent in the quietest way possible. He worked as a business consultant, carried himself with calm dignity, and had eyes that actually saw me, not as an object, not as a servant, but as a person worthy of attention. He courted me for months, never pushing, always respectful, seeming to understand that I carried wounds he couldn't see. Against my better judgment, against every warning sign my traumatized mind threw up, I let him in. I told myself that a name was just a name. I told myself that not every man was like my father. I told myself I could be normal, could have a normal relationship, could escape the cycle. I was wrong on all counts. 2 years into our relationship, he proposed. We got married in a simple ceremony. I had no family to invite, and his family asked few questions about my past. For a brief moment, standing beside him as we exchanged vows, I thought perhaps I'd finally escaped. Perhaps love could heal what violence had broken. The illusion lasted exactly 3 months. The first incident happened at a restaurant in Victoria Island, one of those upscale establishments where the wealthy go to see and be seen. Kemi had taken me there to celebrate a business deal he'd closed, and I'd been genuinely happy for him, proud even. We ordered lunch. I specifically requested jollof rice with chicken because I've always detested beef. The texture, the taste, everything about it turns my stomach. But when the waiter arrived, he placed before me a plate of rice topped with beef. Something inside me snapped. The rage was instant, disproportionate, volcanic. I didn't see a simple mistake by an overworked waiter. I saw disrespect, incompetence, someone not taking me seriously. My hand moved before my brain could intercede, and I slapped him across the face. The restaurant went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midway to every mouth. In that moment of perfect quiet, I heard Kemi's voice, soft and embarrassed. "Cynthia, it's just a mistake." I turned on him. My husband, trying to calm the situation, trying to preserve some dignity. And I shoved him. Hard. He stumbled backward, his chair toppling, his body hitting the floor in front of dozens of witnesses. I walked out with my head high, as if I'd done something righteous instead of something monstrous. When Kemi came home later that evening, he found me in our bedroom, acting as if nothing had happened. He stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of hurt and confusion. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. The waiter made a mistake. There was no reason to hit him. And there was certainly no reason to push me. "He disrespected me," I said, my voice cold. "And you took his side." I wasn't taking his side. I was trying to. You were trying to make me look foolish. You were trying to undermine me. Just like, I stopped myself, but the comparison hung in the air between us. Just like my father had undermined my mother. Kemi looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Not anger. Something sadder. Realization, perhaps. Or resignation. He never finished that conversation. He just walked away, and I told myself I'd won. It happened again. And again. And again. At his office party, when one of his colleagues made a joke I didn't find funny, I slapped Kemi in front of his coworkers for not defending me. At a family gathering, when his mother criticized my cooking, I threw the serving dish against the wall and screamed at him for allowing her to disrespect me. At the shopping mall, when a cashier insisted I hadn't given her 1,000 naira that I was certain I had, I went to slap her, and when Kemi grabbed my wrist to stop me, I slapped him instead. Each time, he took it. Each time, he absorbed the violence without retaliating, without even raising his voice. His friends started making excuses to not spend time with us. His family members stopped calling. We became isolated, trapped in a cycle that I couldn't name but couldn't escape. I told myself I was proving something. That I was showing other men how humble, how patient, how loving Kemi was. That I was testing his devotion, his commitment, his worthiness. But the truth I couldn't face, was simpler and more horrible. I was recreating the only model of marriage I'd ever known. I was becoming my father. The violence wasn't constant. We had good days, even good weeks. Kemi would make me laugh with his terrible jokes. We'd cook together on Sunday mornings, his hands guiding mine as we made egusi soup. We'd talk about the future, children we might have, trips we might take, dreams that felt almost tangible. And then something would trigger me, a perceived slight, a moment of feeling unheard or unseen, and the monster would emerge. Kemi would forgive me every time, his capacity for grace seemingly endless. Which only made me angrier. His patience felt like judgment. His forgiveness felt like condescension. I needed him to fight back. I needed him to prove he was like my father so I could justify living, justify the violence, justify the growing knowledge that something inside me was fundamentally broken. But he never gave me that justification. Until the day he finally did. The extended family meeting was supposed to be about unity, about strengthening family bonds and discussing collective business interest. Kemi's sister Precious was speaking, making some point about financial responsibility, and everyone was nodding along. Except me. Because buried in her diplomatic language was a criticism, veiled but unmistakable, about my spending habits, my attitude, my treatment of her brother. Some people in this family, she said carefully, need to understand that marriage is about partnership, not dominance. About mutual respect, not control. Every eye in the room flickered toward me and then away, but I felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing. My face burned. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table. If you have something to say, Precious, say it directly, I hissed. Don't hide behind pretty words. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm saying that you've been treating Kemi like. I stood so abruptly that my chair fell backward. Before anyone could react, I had crossed the room and grabbed Precious's blouse, twisting the fabric in my fist. You don't know anything about our marriage. I screamed into her face. You don't know what I've been through. You don't. Hands pulled us apart. Multiple hands. The room erupted in chaos, people shouting, trying to restore order, shooting angry glances at me. But I only had eyes for one person. Kemi. He stood in the corner of the room, absolutely still, his face a mask I couldn't read. For the first time since I'd known him, he wasn't rushing to my defense. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't trying to smooth things over. He was just done. "Let's go home," he said flatly. Not to the room, not to his family. To me. We drove in silence. The kind of silence that feels like a living thing, heavy and suffocating. When we pulled up to our house, I expected the usual pattern. We'd fight, I'd say terrible things, he'd forgive me, and we'd pretend nothing had happened. Instead, when I walked through our front gate, I found my belongings piled on the ground. My clothes. My shoes. My books. Everything I owned, sitting in the dirt like garbage. "What is this?" I demanded, whirling on him. "Your things," he said simply. "I want you to leave." For a moment, I couldn't process the words. Viv. Kemi didn't make ultimatums. Kemi didn't set boundaries. Kemi absorbed everything I threw at him and asked for nothing in return. "You can't be serious. I'm sick and tired of this, Cynthia." His voice was so quiet, but there was still underneath. "I've tried to be patient. I've tried to understand. I've made excuses for you to my family, to my friends, to myself. But I'm done. I can't do this anymore." Rage detonated in my chest. Tired. Tired. Who do you think you are, Kemi? You think you can just quit the relationship like that? After everything After everything you've done to me, he interrupted, and there it was, finally, after all this time, a flash of anger in his eyes. "After you've humiliated me, hit me, made my life a living hell. Yes, Cynthia. I can quit this relationship. I should have quit it a long time ago." He took a step toward me, and I saw his hand rise, saw the muscles in his arm tense. For a split second, I thought he was finally going to do it, finally going to hit me back, finally going to prove he was just like my father. "If you don't slap me now," I heard myself say, "I'll do something we'll both regret." His hand dropped. He turned his back on me, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion or defeat or both. It was the turning away that did it. The dismissal. The finality. My hand found the stone before my brain registered what I was doing. It was a large decorative rock from our garden border, heavy and solid. I lifted it above my head and brought it down on the back of his skull with every ounce of strength I possessed. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard. Not like slapping. Not even like my mother's head hitting the coffee table. This was deeper, more final. The sound of a life ending. Kemi collapsed. Blood poured rapidly around his head, black in the fading evening light. And I stood there, the stone still in my hand, and watched him die. I started screaming then. "Help! Somebody help!" Neighbors came running. Someone called an ambulance. They rushed him to the hospital while I played the role of the distraught wife, sobbing, clutching at the paramedics, begging them to save him. But Kemi didn't survive. The head trauma was too severe. By midnight, he was declared dead. And by morning, I was under arrest. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple witnesses testified about my pattern of violence. His family provided statements about the abuse. The scene itself told the story: a man struck from behind, a wife with a history of physical aggression. During the trial, I tried to explain. I talked about my childhood, about my father, about my mother's death. I tried to make them understand that I was a victim too, that trauma had made me this way, that I never meant to kill him. The judge listened. And then he sentenced me to life in prison for murder. I've been in prison for 3 years now. I'm writing this from a cell that measures 3 meters by 4 meters, and I'll die in a cell exactly like this one. I've had a lot of time to think about cycles, about violence, about the lies we tell ourselves. My father killed my mother, so I killed my father. And then, years later, I killed my husband. 3 deaths, all connected by an invisible thread of trauma and rage. People ask me if I regret it. The answer is more complicated than yes or no. I regret that Kemi is dead. I regret that I became the thing I feared most. I regret that I couldn't break the cycle that was handed to me like a cursed inheritance. But here's what haunts me most: in the long, empty hours, Kemi never raised his hand to me. Not once. In all the times I hit him, humiliated him, degraded him, he never struck back. He was everything my father wasn't: gentle, patient, kind. And I killed him anyway. Because trauma doesn't care about good intentions. It doesn't care about love. It finds the cracks in your foundation and it whispers that violence is the only language that matters, that control is the only thing that keeps you safe, that showing weakness, showing humanity, is the same as inviting death. I proved to other men how humble my husband was by slapping him in public. I tested his love by seeing how much abuse he could take. And when he finally set a boundary, when he finally said enough, I couldn't handle it. I chose violence. Just like my father before me. This is my karma. Not the prison sentence, though that's certainly part of it. The real karma is the knowledge that I had a chance at something different, something better, and I destroyed it with my own hands. If you're reading this, if you've watched this whole video, I want you to understand something: trauma is an explanation, but it's not an excuse. What was done to me was horrible, but what I did to Kemi was horrible too. Both things can be true. Break the cycle. Whatever abuse you suffered, whatever violence shaped you, you have a choice. Every single day, you have a choice. Don't let your past dictate your future the way I did. Don't become your father. Don't become your mother. Don't become me. Because karma isn't just punishment from the universe. Sometimes karma is looking in the mirror and realizing you've become exactly what you hate. And by then, it's already too late. My name is Cynthia, and I killed the only man who ever really loved me. This is my story. This is my warning. This is my life sentence. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the cycles in your own life, please subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts. And remember, every choice matters. Every moment is a chance to be different. Don't waste it the way I did.